Bill Karen.
Josh, thank you, and it's good to be in this great Republican enclave here. I appreciate this party activist group here. Seriously, you guys coming out on a Saturday morning are the tip of the spear when we go after Democrats and when you recruit your candidates and when you elect people to public office, but perhaps most importantly, when you adhere to the principles of limited government and individual responsibility and educating other folks to bring folks into the fold. Some of you have heard me say this before, but I think bears repeating, especially since we have candidates here today. The Republican Party is a center-right party. Now, I don't apologize for being a constitutional conservative, but we've got to remember if we win elections and win adherence, we've got to make sure the center comes toward us, because the hard left, what I call the dark side, is working on it all the time. And I'm going to discuss that for a few minutes. I'm going to discuss some of the big money that's against us, and I'm going to maybe finish up by kind of looking into the crystal ball with some state and national Republican politics. And of course, I love to entertain questions and answers. But when we talk about pulling in the center, I think we need to, as we expand our influence with our friends, bringing in new people, we need to point out what the enemy is doing. And I don't mean just Democrats. There's some good Democrats out there. Hopefully we can pull them in and get them to change. You know, Ronald Reagan was once a Democrat. Sonny Perdue was once a Democrat. But, you know, we don't want to change our values just to bring people in. We've got to uphold. It's interesting, the Bible says, know thine enemy. And that's why I wrote my latest book, Foundations of Betrayal, because I'm going to take a minute or two to just talk about the big tax-exempt left-wing foundations that are really driving change in this country just as much as politicians on the Democratic side and the media and even folks in the academy. It's a very underreported, murky world of big money that we are up against. I used to think that it was the Republican Party, we've all heard this, the party of business, that had all the money. Wrong. We are up against huge, and may I say even anti-American forces in this country. The foundations, I could do a roll call: Ford, Rockefeller, MacArthur, Carnegie, Ted Turner right here in Atlanta. Remember Teresa Heinz Carey? We're trying to forget her. Her foundation. George Soros, his Open Society Institute. Hundreds of these tax-exempt foundations funneling all of our enemies, including groups that want to undermine our U.S. troops and even radical Islamic charities. Let me tell you something. I was on Lou Dobbs and Bill O'Reilly this last summer doing my book tour. And the Ford Foundation, this is a badge of honor, the Ford Foundation attacked me because I documented the fact that this #1 anti-American foundation is funding radical Islamic charities, including groups supporting suicide bombers. And I don't back off from that claim, and I keep that on my website. I attack the Ford Foundation back. And this is the type of thing you don't read in the left-wing Atlanta papers or in the mainstream media. How a foundation of $11 billion in assets is trying to change America and hate America, and they don't give a darn about elections or court rulings or anything like that. This is the political battering ram that the left has under the guise of charity. So remember, when we talk to our Republican senators and congressmen, and even Democrat senators and congressmen, let's take away the tax-exempt status of these left-wing foundations that are viscerally anti-American. They're not just liberal. Don't get me wrong here. They're anti-American. The Ford Foundation funds groups like this El Mazen Human Rights Center that sympathizes with Palestinian suicide bombers. The Ford and Rockefeller Foundations support everything from black Muslim groups that are very radical and dangerous, that specialize in killing policemen. And believe it or not, this will give you an inkling as to how radical the Ford and Rockefeller Foundations are. The American Civil Liberties Union, no friend to Republicans and conservatives. They actually rejected grants from the Ford and Rockefeller Foundation a few years ago because they were linked to terrorists. Unbelievable. This isn't some conservative group saying this. George Soros will kind of give you the mindset of the liberal elites in this country. We all know as Republicans that Soros bankrolled just $4 million in radio ads in 2004 against George Bush. He is spending $28 million, I think, that year just to defeat Republicans around the country. He set up the Open Society Institute. It's a huge left-wing tax-exempt foundation. He set up foundations all around Western Europe, very pro-radical Muslim, for example. Billions over the last, perhaps, decade have gone to radical Islamic groups. A quick example is Greenpeace. I used to think growing up that was just a little tree-hugging conservationist organization. Wrong. If you get on the website of Greenpeace, one of its main missions is to undermine U.S. troops and the supplies that go to U.S. troops in the Mideast. Huge recipient of Ford Foundation, Rockefeller, Carnegie, Soros, the list goes on. And what's sad, I might add, is many of these foundations, founded by the captains of capitalism, have been totally hijacked by socialists and globalists and the anti-Americans. They love the United Nations and really want to undermine our U.S. sovereignty. That's another part of the goal, is to undermine our sovereignty. Here's a quote from George Soros. I have this in my book. The main obstacle to a just and stable world is the United States of America. He hates us. That's what we're up against. This is the guy who finances every candidate around the country that tries to, that runs against conservatives. In fact, they were very effective when we lost control of the Congress. Peter Lewis, a huge Hollywood leftist friend of Soros, actually, I found this out the other day from some of my college Republican friends, actually has donated, I think it's $100,000. I'll have to check my figure on that to the Young Democrats of Georgia. So they're competitive with the college Republicans. And I'm not just saying this because Scott Bullard is here, but I know his son over at the University of Georgia College Republicans, and I do a lot of speaking on campuses in this state and everywhere else. And if you want a special project for your Republican group, pick the college Republicans and write them a check, because they really are on the front lines of what's going on in this country. There's some fine young men and women on these campuses, and even for a so-called conservative state, they are actually persecuted. At the University of Georgia, a quick example, they tried to kick out a Christian fraternity. There was so much outcry that they backed off. At Georgia Tech, 2 students, one a Christian student, one a Jewish student, members of the college Republican chapter, were actually harassed. They had to have police escort them to classes this last year because radical Islamists were threatening them with death right on the Georgia Tech campus. And the liberal police chief and the liberal president, Wayne Clough of Georgia Tech, did nothing. The 2 kids had to actually go to federal court to get their free speech rights restored so they could pass out their literature